Today, we're reviewing Power and Progress, Our 1,000-Year Struggle Over Technology and Prosperity by Daron Acemoglu and Simon Johnson. This book offers a thought-provoking and detailed analysis of the relationship between technological advancement and societal well-being. Acemoglu and Johnson challenge a deeply ingrained assumption, the notion of the productivity bandwagon, which suggests that technological progress automatically leads to widespread prosperity. The central concept is the productivity bandwagon illusion. The authors illustrate this fallacy through several examples, one of which is the Industrial Revolution. While often hailed as a period of unprecedented progress, they highlight the immense suffering and inequality it engendered, particularly in its preliminary stages. The authors don't deny the eventual benefits, but these benefits were not automatic nor evenly distributed. Another crucial concept in the book is the malleability of technology. Acemoglu and Johnson contend that technology is not a predetermined, unbiased force, but rather a tool shaped by the power dynamics and visions of those who control it. They argue that the current AI landscape is dominated by a narrow vision focused on automation, driven by a desire for profit maximization and control over data. This AI illusion, as they call it, leads to technologies that primarily benefit a small elite at the expense of the majority. But the book is not entirely pessimistic. Acemoglu and Johnson offer a path forward, advocating for a more democratic approach to shaping technological development. They believe that we need to move away from the Friedman doctrine. Ultimately, Power and Progress is a call for a more conscious and democratic approach to shaping technological development. It reminds us that technology is not a neutral force, but a powerful tool that can be used to either reinforce existing inequalities or create a more just and prosperous future for all. So let's dive into today's podcast. As always, please share, like, and subscribe.
Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep? Today, we're tackling Power and Progress, a book that stirred up quite a bit of conversation. It challenges the classic tech utopia narrative, wouldn't you say?
Definitely refreshing. Acemoglu and Johnson really dig into how technology has always been a tool for those in power. And if we want a future that benefits more than just the elite, well, understanding that historical pattern is crucial.
That's a powerful argument, and with their backgrounds, definitely worth exploring. For those unfamiliar, can you tell us a bit about Acemoglu and Johnson?
Absolutely. So Daron Acemoglu, he's a professor at MIT, a real heavyweight in economics. His focus is political economy, how institutions like property rights or political systems influence a nation's economic path.
So looking beyond just the numbers, at the bigger picture of how societies actually function.
Exactly, the societal forces at play. Now, Simon Johnson, also at MIT, brings this really global perspective, having been the former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund. He's a leading voice on financial crises, globalization, the really complex challenges of economic development on a global scale.
Both incredibly accomplished. What prompted them to write Power and Progress, then? It feels very timely with all the anxiety around AI and automation these days.
You hit the nail on the head. It's a direct response to that unease about technology's impact jobs, wages, even the spread of misinformation. Their argument is that progress doesn't automatically lift everyone up. It depends on how it's directed, who benefits, and who might get left behind.
Technology is a tool, then, not a guarantee. How do they unpack that argument in the book?
Their core concept is directed technical change. Technology isn't this neutral force. It doesn't just appear. It's shaped by those with the power to decide what gets developed, how it's used, who profits from it.
So this smartphone I'm holding right now, that wasn't inevitable. Someone, somewhere, with resources and an agenda, influenced its creation.
Precisely. And to illustrate this directed technical change, they take us on a historical tour, showing how power dynamics have always shaped technology. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not so much.
This is where it gets really interesting. Can you walk us through some of these examples?
They start with, well, the big one, the Industrial Revolution. A classic case of progress with both winners and losers. Productivity skyrocketed, but many workers faced awful conditions, poverty, displacement. They tell the story of George Stephenson, a railway engineer who really embodies both the promise and the peril of that era.
Stevenson, the one who designed the rocket.
That's the one. Born into poverty, rose to become a leading engineer. But his story also highlights the resistance to innovation. During those parliamentary hearings for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, he faced incredible scrutiny. People doubted his vision, even mocked his expertise. He ultimately succeeded, but it shows progress is rarely a smooth, straight line.
And those who didn't have Stephenson's success, those left behind by the Industrial Revolution, the book mentions the Luddites.
Right, the Luddites. Often portrayed as simply anti-technology, but the book digs deeper. They were more concerned about how technology was used against their livelihoods, their bargaining power. It reminds us that even with seemingly unstoppable change, people push back when they feel like progress is coming at their expense.
So it's about more than just the machines themselves, but the whole system they're part of. What other historical examples do they explore?
They look at the American system of manufacturing, a stark contrast to the British model. This system prioritized high wages, worker productivity, which led to innovations like the assembly line.
Sounds like a win-win. Weren't they big on worker well-being too?
Well, not entirely altruistic. They understood that a more prosperous workforce was a more productive one, a more loyal one. Henry Ford's $5 a day wage, while groundbreaking, wasn't just social good, it was good business. This system did contribute to a thriving middle class, though. But as we'll see later in the book, this model faced its own set of challenges, especially as corporate priorities shifted towards shareholder value over shared prosperity.
A cautionary tale for sure. Now, we can't talk about technology and power without addressing the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the algorithm in the smartphone.
Absolutely. They draw direct parallels between the digital revolution and the industrial revolution. Incredible innovation, but alongside rising inequality, job displacement from automation, misinformation fueled by algorithms.
It does feel like we're living through one of those historical inflection points they describe.
Precisely. And to help navigate it, they give us several key concepts. One is the productivity bandwagon. In theory, productivity gains should lead to higher wages, a better standard of living for everyone.
That's the ideal scenario. What's the catch?
Historically, that bandwagon's been derailed, often by those in power who manage to capture most of the benefits, leaving everyone else behind. Makes you wonder, will the promises of AI and automation be any different?
A sobering thought. Are there other key concepts we should keep in mind?
They talk about persuasion power, the ability to shape not just what technology is made, but why and for whom. They illustrate it with figures like Henry Ford. His vision wasn't just cars, it was transforming society.
So it's about selling a vision, getting people to buy into a specific future.
Exactly. And whoever controls that narrative, they hold immense power. They call this social power and agenda setting, which raises the question, in our tech-saturated world, who is setting the agenda now? And whose voices are we not hearing?
Crucial questions to ponder. Now, I know they explore these ideas in detail throughout the book. Chapter 1, The Panopticon is a Factory, paints a rather chilling picture.
It does, doesn't it? They use the panopticon, Jeremy Bentham's concept of the prison where inmates are constantly watched, as a metaphor for the factory system. Samuel Bentham, Jeremy's brother, actually envisioned this panopticon-like setup for factories, a few supervisors monitoring a huge workforce.
Maximizing efficiency through constant surveillance. Sounds a bit dystopian.
Indeed. While not every factory became a literal panopticon, it captures the essence of that era output and control prioritized over the worker.
So technology is a tool for surveillance and exploitation.
Precisely. They used the British textile industry during the Industrial Revolution as an example. New machines, like the spinning jenny, increased production, but also broke down skilled labor into smaller, more mundane tasks.
Creating a system where workers, often women and children, faced brutal conditions for meager wages.
Exactly. And while some, like our engineer Stevenson, rose above those circumstances, countless others were left behind, their skills no longer valued in this new technological landscape. This chapter really sets the stage for their main argument. You can't separate technology's impact from the power dynamics shaping it.
Now, Chapter 2, The Economics of a Roman Emperor, feels like a bit of a shift. What's the connection to their core argument?
Well, they take us back to ancient Rome to show that this interplay of technology and power, it's not new. They focus on Emperor Vespasian. After the Roman Civil War, he had to rebuild Rome's infrastructure and economy, and he focused on what we might consider mundane innovations, roads, aqueducts, even public toilets.
Public toilets. Interesting choice.
It highlights a key point. Technology is often as much about social engineering as it is about technical breakthroughs. Public sanitation was a huge issue in Rome, and Vespasian saw an opportunity to improve public health, but also generate revenue, taxing urine, which was used in various industries.
Resourceful, I'll give him that.
Mhm.
So even back then, technology was seen as a way to address societal needs while also serving those in power.
Exactly. And Vespasian, like any savvy leader, knew how to frame these innovations. They were for the public good, sure, but they also solidified his own power.
A classic power play. Acemoglu and Johnson are building a compelling case here for how deeply intertwined technology and power have always been.
They are. And to further drive that point home, they take us to the Renaissance in Chapter 3, the market for ideas.
The Renaissance. Known for its explosion of intellectual and technological advancement, what's their take on that era?
They argue that even during this period of supposed intellectual freedom, the marketplace for ideas wasn't a level playing field. Universities, scientific societies, they emerged. But those with wealth and influence could still steer research, control access to knowledge.
So the question of who benefits from technological progress, it was still very much alive.
Absolutely. And they use the story of Galileo to illustrate this, challenging the church's view of the universe. His persecution shows how those in power can stifle innovation that threatens them.
A stark reminder that progress isn't always linear or easy. There are always power struggles, competing interests.
Precisely. Technological advancement, the spread of knowledge, often hinges on who holds the reins of power, whose vision for the future wins out.
It's a complex picture they're painting. Where do they go from there? What other historical periods do they examine?
In Chapter 4, Original Sins, they take us all the way back to the dawn of civilization. They explore the shift from hunter-gatherer societies to settled agriculture. Crucial for development, but it also laid the groundwork for new forms of power and inequality.
Interesting. How do they connect agriculture to the rise of inequality?
Agriculture led to surplus resources, which in turn led to social stratification. Those who controlled the land, the food, they amassed wealth and power, while others became dependent on them. This created a system of haves and have-nots that's persisted throughout history in various forms.
So the very foundation of civilization also contained the seeds of inequality.
Precisely. They use ancient Egypt as an example. The pyramids, marvels of engineering, required massive labor, centralized control over resources. This allowed the pharaohs to consolidate their power and create a very stratified society.
Even the most impressive human achievements can be used to reinforce existing power structures.
Exactly. Technological innovation, even in its earliest forms, isn't inherently good or bad. It's a tool that can be used to create prosperity or exploitation, depending on who controls it.
That's a crucial point. So how does this chapter connect to their broader argument about power and technological progress?
They're tracing the roots of the power dynamics we see today back to civilization's beginnings. The way we structure our societies, our economies, our technologies has often been shaped by these enduring patterns of power and control.
Understanding those patterns can help us critically examine our own technological landscape.
No.
Recognize the potential for both progress and exploitation.
Precisely. It allows us to ask those crucial questions. Who benefits from advancements? Who bears the costs? And how can we shape a future that is both innovative and equitable?
It's incredible how these historical echoes resonate even today. Moving from ancient Egypt to a darker chapter in American history, Chapter 5, The Savage Gin, digs into the cotton gin and its complex legacy.
A stark reminder that technological progress doesn't always equal moral progress. Eli Whitney's invention, ingenious as it was, had a devastating consequence. It intensified the horrors of slavery in the South.
A chilling example of how technology can be used to reinforce systems of oppression.
Precisely. Making cotton production so much more efficient, it fueled the demand for slave labor. A heartbreaking illustration of how those in power, in this case, slaveholders, can direct technology to serve their interests, even at the cost of human suffering.
Underscores the point that technology isn't inherently good or bad. It's how it's used and by whom that really matters.
Absolutely. And they even delve into how the narrative around slavery itself was shaped by those in power, propagating this idea that it was a necessary evil, even a positive good, using their influence to justify a system built on racial hierarchy and exploitation.
It's a chilling reminder of how those in power can manipulate information, control the narrative to maintain their grip on power. Speaking of power dynamics during times of technological upheaval, Chapter 6, Casualties of Progress, takes us back to the Industrial Revolution, but this time focusing on its darker underbelly.
This chapter really shines a light on that often overlooked human cost of progress. They explore the grim reality faced by many during that time: harsh working conditions, widespread poverty, social upheaval as machines replaced traditional ways of life.
It's easy to romanticize the era of steam engines in factories, but the book doesn't shy away from the hardships faced by those on the wrong side of progress.
Exactly. They argue that this early phase of the Industrial Revolution was driven by an almost singular focus on automation replacing human labor with machines, often with little regard for the social and economic consequences. The Luddites, as we discussed earlier, are a poignant example of this tension.
Fighting for their livelihoods, their very way of life, against a system that seemed determined to leave them behind. It's a reminder that even amidst progress, there are always those who bear the brunt of the disruption.
Precisely. And the book highlights how, in that era, workers had very little power to shape the direction of technological change or advocate for their own well-being. They were often at the mercy of factory owners who prioritized profit over people.
A stark contrast to the American system of manufacturing, which they explore in Chapter 7, Gifts from Across the Atlantic. Didn't that model offer a more promising approach?
It did, for a time. They contrast this American system, with its emphasis on high wages and worker productivity, with the British model that often prioritized automation over worker well-being. And they argue that this difference wasn't just about technological prowess, it was rooted in a different set of social and economic circumstances.
The American system, with its focus on skilled labor, mass production, it seemed to offer a path where technological advancement could go hand in hand with a thriving middle class.
Precisely. And they illustrate this with the example of Henry Ford and his revolutionary $5 a day wage. Now, while Ford understood the business case for a well-paid workforce, increased productivity, loyalty, this approach also contributed to a more equitable distribution of the benefits of progress.
It reminds us that businesses can be powerful drivers of social change, that economic prosperity and social equity don't have to be at odds. But as you mentioned earlier, this model wasn't perfect. Did the American system actually live up to its promise?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? While it flourished for a while, it eventually faced challenges, which they explore later in the book. A good reminder that no system is perfect. Even the most promising models need to adapt and evolve.
A sobering thought.
Yeah.
But before we get into those challenges, let's shift our attention to a different model of economic development. One they explore in Chapter 8, the Swedish solution.
Ah, Sweden, often held up as a model for social democracy, economic equality. The authors delve into how Sweden in the early 20th century navigated industrialization and technological change by charting a different course. They created a robust welfare state prioritizing social security, universal health care, strong labor protections.
So instead of leaving workers to fend for themselves in the face of disruption, they built a safety net.
Exactly. A proactive approach to mitigating the downsides of change while still harnessing its power for growth. They highlight the role of the Swedish Social Democratic Workers' Party in shaping this model. They understood that progress could lead to prosperity and upheaval, and they aimed to create a system that balanced those forces.
A powerful example of how government policies, political will, can shape technology's impact on society. Did they find that the Swedish model was successful?
By most measures, yes. Sweden boasts a high standard of living, low inequality, a strong social safety net. But they do point out it's not a utopia. It's had its own share of challenges.
Every system has its limitations, but certainly intriguing, especially as we grapple with AI and automation. Which brings us to Chapter 9, Artificial Struggle. Here, they really tackle those anxieties around AI.
They don't sugarcoat it. They acknowledge AI's immense potential, but argue that unchecked, it could worsen existing inequalities and create new ones.
The double-edged sword of our time, isn't it? AI could solve some of humanity's biggest problems, but also displace workers, concentrate wealth, erode our privacy.
Precisely. They look at how AI is already being used: manufacturing, transportation, healthcare, finance, automating tasks, increasing efficiency, and yes, displacing workers. While this can mean productivity gains, it also raises concerns about job security, wage stagnation.
That old fear of machines replacing human labor, but amplified by AI's growing capabilities.
And they go beyond the economic anxieties, too. They sound the alarm about AI's potential impact on privacy, autonomy. Think about the spread of surveillance, facial recognition, AI in law enforcement. These aren't just technological advancements. They raise ethical questions about how much control we're willing to cede to machines.
A chilling thought. They paint a rather concerning picture, but do they offer any solutions for steering AI in a more humane direction?
They do. They call for a shift in focus from what they call machine intelligence to machine usefulness.
Those terms intrigue me. What's the distinction?
Machine intelligence is about AI that can outperform humans. Machine usefulness prioritizes how AI can help humans address our needs, designing AI to work alongside us, not replace us.
So instead of AI that can beat us at chess, AI that can help us tackle climate change or cure diseases.
Exactly. They argue for a more proactive approach to guiding AI research, encouraging investment in areas that prioritize social good, human well-being.
It's about ensuring AI serves humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly. And that requires more than just technological advancements, ethical frameworks, regulations, and a shift in our mindset about what we want AI to achieve.
A tall order, but a necessary one if we want to avoid those dystopian sci-fi scenarios.
Indeed. And speaking of potential threats to democracy, Chapter 10, Democracy Breaks, tackles a big one: social media.
Social media. The platform that promised to connect us all, democratize information, has in many ways done the opposite.
The paradox of our time. They argue that while social media has the potential for connection, democratic discourse, it's also being used to spread misinformation, manipulate public opinion, and erode trust in institutions.
We've seen this play out in real time. Fake news, echo chambers, foreign interference in elections, all highlighting the dark side of social media.
Precisely. And they dig into the root of the problem, the business model. Many social media platforms rely on targeted advertising, maximizing user engagement. It's a race to the bottom for our attention.
The attention economy, where outrage and emotional triggers often win out over facts and nuanced debate.
Exactly. They talk about how algorithms, while often presented as neutral, are designed to keep us hooked. Often by feeding us content that confirms our biases, those filter bubbles.
Like we're all living in our own curated realities, shielded from alternative viewpoints.
And they illustrate this with a look at Facebook and the 2016 U.S. election. While social media's impact on that election is still debated, their analysis shows how these platforms, intentionally or not, can be used to manipulate opinion and sway outcomes.
A reminder that we can't be passive consumers of information, especially in the age of social media. We need to think critically, be aware of our own biases, seek out diverse perspectives.
Absolutely. And beyond the spread of misinformation, they also raise concerns about social media's impact on our attention spans, mental health, our ability to have meaningful conversations. It's sobering, but they do offer some hope. They argue that we need to hold these platforms accountable, demand transparency in their algorithms, and most importantly, reclaim our own agency as discerning consumers of information.
It's a call to action. We're not just passive users. We have the power to shape these platforms, to demand better.
Indeed. Which brings us to the heart of their argument, laid out in Chapter 11, Redirecting Technology. This final chapter is a call to arms, urging us to take back control of technology and steer it towards a future that benefits everyone.
After painting such a stark picture of the challenges, it's reassuring to know they offer a path forward, a way to redirect technology towards a more just and equitable future. What are some of their key recommendations?
They propose a multi-pronged approach, addressing both the supply side and the demand side of innovation. On the supply side, they advocate for policies that incentivize technologies that address societal needs, promote the common good. Things like increased government investment in research and development, particularly in areas like renewable energy, healthcare, and education.
So not leaving technological development solely to the market, but having the government play a role in shaping innovation towards a more humane and sustainable future.
Exactly. We need to be more deliberate about the kinds of technologies we create, the values we embed in them.
And on the demand side, how do they propose we create a society that's more receptive to these advancements, that benefits more broadly from them?
This is where their focus on economic justice comes in. They argue that a more equitable distribution of income and wealth is essential for ensuring everyone has the opportunity to benefit. This includes policies like strengthening worker bargaining power, raising the minimum wage, expanding access to education and healthcare, reforming the tax code to reduce inequality.
So it's not just about creating the right technologies. It's about creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to share in the benefits. A holistic approach, recognizing the interconnectedness of technological progress, economic justice, social well-being.
Precisely. And they argue this approach isn't just moral, it's economically sound. A more equitable society is a more innovative society because it unlocks the potential of a wider range of people. It creates a larger market for new products and services.
The powerful argument for that link between social justice and technological progress. One can't truly thrive without the other. Now, throughout the book, they use a lot of historical examples, economic theories, real-world cases to make their case for redirecting technology. What are some of the most compelling examples they use?
They offer a fascinating mix. They delve into the story of Samuel Slater, who brought the secrets of textile manufacturing from Britain to America, essentially kickstarting the Industrial Revolution here. They analyze the different approaches to industrialization taken by Britain and the U.S., highlighting how different contexts lead to different outcomes. Technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It shapes and is shaped by the societies in which it emerges.
Exactly. And to show the power of vision in shaping technological progress, they discuss figures like Ferdinand de Lesseps, who spearheaded the building of the Suez Canal. It seemed impossible, but his vision, determination, political maneuvering, and a little luck changed the course of history.
A testament to human ingenuity and ambition. But of course, not all visions are created equal, nor are they all driven by noble intentions.
Indeed, they balance those stories of triumph with cautionary tales, like the tobacco industry's campaign to downplay the risks of smoking. An example of how persuasion power, used for harmful purposes, can have devastating consequences.
It's chilling how vested interests can exploit our biases, manipulate information, and delay action on critical issues.
Precisely. And to highlight the importance of understanding how social power shapes technology, they look at examples like the landed aristocracy in England, who for centuries used their influence to maintain a system of land ownership that benefited them at the expense of others, stifling innovation in agriculture. Entrenched power structures resisting change, even when it's in everyone's best interest. And their analysis of the Gilded Age, rapid industrialization, wealth creation, but also rampant inequality and exploitation, further underscores this point.
Exactly. The Gilded Age as a cautionary tale about unfettered capitalism and the need for guardrails to ensure that progress is shared more broadly.
It seems like they draw lessons from all corners of history, weaving together these triumphs, failures, cautionary tales to really illuminate this complex relationship.
They do, and they use these insights to inform their recommendations for the future. We need to be more aware of how power dynamics can shape technological development. And we need to find ways to ensure that technology is used to create a more just and equitable society rather than reinforcing existing power structures.
It's not just about the technologies themselves, but the entire system they operate within.
Exactly. And they do offer concrete suggestions for creating a more equitable playing field. One interesting idea is a robot tax.
A robot tax. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It might sound futuristic, but it's a concept gaining traction as automation becomes more prevalent. The idea is to tax companies that use robots to replace human workers. The revenue could then fund social programs, retrain those displaced workers, or even provide a basic income.
It's certainly a thought-provoking idea. Wouldn't that discourage companies from investing in automation, potentially slowing down progress?
That's a valid concern. The authors acknowledge this and emphasize that any robot tax would have to be carefully designed to avoid unintended consequences. It should target companies replacing workers with robots, not those using robots to complement human skills or create new jobs.
Finding that balance, encouraging innovation while protecting workers, it's tricky.
Precisely. They also explore the idea of a universal basic income, or UBI, as a potential response to automation.
UBI has been a hot topic lately. What's their take on it?
They acknowledge UBI could provide a safety net for workers displaced by automation, but they also have concerns about its feasibility and potential unintended consequences. For instance, it would be very expensive. It's not clear where the funding would come from. And they worry that it could disincentivize work, which could have negative effects on the economy.
So a complex issue with both potential benefits and drawbacks.
Exactly. And they stress that UBI, even if implemented, wouldn't address the root causes of inequality. We need to go beyond just a safety net. We need a fundamentally fairer and more just economic system.
Addressing the systemic issues, not just the symptoms.
Precisely, and education is a crucial part of this.
They talk about reforming education to better prepare students for the jobs of the future. What are some of their thoughts there?
They criticize the current education system for being too focused on memorization and standardized tests. It doesn't equip students for a rapidly changing job market. They advocate for a more holistic approach: critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, collaboration, skills that are transferable across different fields.
So less about teaching students what to think, and more about teaching them how to think, how to adapt, learn, thrive in a world of constant change.
Exactly. These skills are essential for navigating a world increasingly shaped by technology. They also highlight digital literacy, making sure all students have access to technology and training to succeed in a digital economy.
It's not just about coding, it's about navigating the digital landscape, discerning fact from fiction, being informed citizens in a digital democracy.
Precisely. Beyond these policy proposals, they also emphasize shifting our societal norms and values to create a more inclusive and equitable technological future.
What kind of cultural shifts do they envision?
They challenge this ingrained idea that technology is inherently good, that progress is inevitable. This techno-optimism can blind us to the potential downsides and make us complacent about addressing the unintended consequences.
So cultivating a healthy skepticism, asking tough questions about the technologies we create.
Exactly. They also stress the need for a more inclusive, diverse tech sector. A lack of diversity, both gender and racial, has contributed to a narrowness of vision and a lack of attention to the needs of marginalized communities.
It's not just about fairness and representation. It's about harnessing the full potential of human ingenuity by ensuring everyone has a seat at the table.
Right. A more diverse tech sector would be more innovative, more responsive to a wider range of needs, and ultimately more beneficial for everyone.
So their vision for redirecting technology is multifaceted, addressing inequality, reforming education, promoting diversity in tech, fostering a more critical understanding of technology's role. It's a big task, requiring a collective effort.
It is, but they believe we can do it. Throughout history, societies have successfully harnessed technology for good. We can learn from our successes and failures to create a more just and equitable future.
It's encouraging to hear that amidst all the challenges, they remain hopeful. Now let's look at some criticisms of the book.
Of course. While Power and Progress has received praise for its insights and arguments, it has its critics. Some argue that the authors are too pessimistic about technology's ability to solve problems, that they overemphasize the risks and downsides, downplaying its potential to improve lives, alleviate poverty, address global challenges like climate change.
So, too focused on the potential pitfalls of progress without fully acknowledging its transformative potential.
That's one critique. Others say they don't offer enough concrete solutions. They acknowledge the policy recommendations, but some find them too vague, idealistic, or politically unrealistic.
Diagnosing the problem is one thing, offering workable solutions is another.
Exactly. And some take issue with their historical interpretation. They argue that Acemoglu and Johnson pick and choose examples to fit their narrative, oversimplifying history and ignoring counterarguments.
Presenting a somewhat one-sided view of history to support their arguments.
That's the gist of it. But despite these criticisms, Power and Progress has sparked an important conversation about technology's role in our lives and the need to ensure it serves the common good. It's a call to action for everyone: policymakers, business leaders, technologists, citizens, to think more critically about technology and shape its development to benefit all of humanity.
A reminder that technology isn't some force of nature we're powerless to control. It's a tool, a product of human choices. We have the power to shape its trajectory.
Precisely. That's perhaps the most important takeaway. We're not just along for the ride, we're the ones holding the steering wheel. Whether we steer toward a more just and equitable future, or careen towards one marked by inequality and upheaval, is ultimately up to us.
A sobering but empowering thought.
It really makes you question those assumptions about progress, doesn't it? Makes you think about those hidden costs.
It's easy to get swept up in the hype of the newest, shiniest thing. But this book, it really makes you pause, look beyond the surface. Who benefits? Who gets left behind? What kind of future are we building?
Exactly. And it's not enough to just sit back and critique. We have to find ways to steer technology's power, make sure it leads to a future that works for everyone. That's really their core message.
It really is. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into Power and Progress. This book has been quite the eye-opener.
It really has. A must-read for anyone who wants to understand how technology is shaping our world and how we can shape a better future.
Well said. And for our listeners who want to go even deeper, we'll link to the book and other resources in the show notes.
Fantastic. I encourage everyone to check them out.
As always, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep challenging the status quo, keep striving for a better tomorrow.